Welcome to You Not Crazy Conversations of Hope podcast. We are on episode 6 today. We are talking about playing it safe, unraveling the roots of people pleasing. If you caught me in the last episode, we talked about perfectionism and how one of the traits of perfectionism is people pleasing. Well, I really want to talk a little bit more about people-pleasing behaviors and the underlying reasons behind them and how they really do impact our relationships with ourselves and others. All right, so people-pleasing, what is that, right? So first of all, people-pleasing is this need to want to really put people before ourselves. Right. So this is some examples could be seeking their approval. It could be wanting to make sure you hear their thoughts on something. So in a sense, going to their thoughts, their opinions, their ideas before yours. Right. And choosing theirs before yours. All right. So some of the forms that I recognize when it comes to people pleasing shows up as, again, seeking approval, avoiding conflict, prioritizing other people's needs, playing it safe, canceling your plans to meet their needs. It's almost just a form of overcompensating to a degree, meaning you're trying to do things to get their approval. All right. And so I want to talk about the motivational factors behind people pleasing, meaning the things that motivate us to want to people please. Right. So one could be wanting to receive validation, fear of being rejected or maybe not accepted by a relationship or a friend group. Sometimes it could also be the desire to fit in. So these are the things that motivate an individual to want to people please. All right. So I want to talk though a little bit about the difference between something we call altruism and people pleasing. All right. So the difference is in altruism, it is a strive to want to take care of others. It's just a natural thing. You want to be kind. You want to help others. You have this desire just to want to see others do good. But people pleasing on the opposite is that you still have that, but there are some different factors that motivate the difference between the two. Okay. So first is the intent. In altruism, the intent is I am doing this from an internal place, meaning I want to help because my heart is for people and I want to see them do good. And for people pleasing, the intent is more extrinsic. So it's an outside motivation, meaning I want their validation. I want to be accepted. I want them to approve of me. Okay. So then I want to go then to the next point, which is boundaries. The difference between altruism is I have boundaries. All right. So that means the individual will say, okay, you know what? I can do this for you, but I have my limitations. With people pleasing, there's no boundaries. They're a little loose. They're adjustable quite a lot. All right. So there's a lack of boundaries. So there's no limitations on what you will do for that individual. All right. So another thing is the outcome. In altruism, it is, okay, I'm doing this, but, things they may benefit me, but they also may benefit the other individual. With people pleasing, the outcome is it's just one-sided, meaning I'm doing, and it's not necessarily a mutual benefit, meaning the other person is not giving to me as much as I'm giving to them, and I'm not receiving from them as much as maybe I should. There's no balance there. Okay. And then the emotional impact with the difference between the two. In altruism, the emotional impact is, okay, you know what? I am doing for them and I'm happy that I was able to do that for them. And my intent was good. It's a mutual connection. I have boundaries. But in people pleasing, there is more of an emotional impact, which again talks about the well-being, which is anxiety usually happens as an emotional impact. Burnout typically also happen as an emotional impact, and even resentment. Okay, so I want to talk about a little bit more of the root causes behind people pleasing. One of the biggest root causes is childhood experiences. Okay, so if you've never heard of the term codependency, it is a term that was used back in the day to describe a trait that an individual carries in the event that they grew up in a household with someone who suffered from an addiction. But further research has allowed us to research more that codependency is also what we consider a trauma response. Meaning, if I grew up in an environment that was dysfunctional, or there was a lot of unpredictability going on in the environment, then I've learned different ways to show up. And one of those areas that I may learn in a codependent environment growing up in that experience is to be a people pleaser. Meaning, in certain environment, a child will decide to do certain things to please the individual as a way to make peace. We call that, in a sense, magical thinking. Children will do things in hopes of getting a certain response. Let's say if I decide to help mom with this, even though I know I can be going outside hanging my friends because mom maybe needs help with paying the bills, then I'm going to do this because I want mom to be pleased with me. Or if I have a parent who is an alcoholic and they come home and I know they're upset and I don't want to make them upset anymore, so maybe I will just maybe keep to myself, stay in the room so I can keep peace, or maybe I'll just do things as a way to survive in the environment that I'm in. So people pleasing, again, is one of these things that develops in that codependent environment from that childhood experience, because I learn how to show up in a way, even if that way of showing up doesn't meet my needs. I learn how to meet the needs of others for the sake of survival. Okay, so again, childhood experiences can really be the root cause of people pleasing, because if I show up in this role, I get this certain result, I'm just going to learn how to, again, show up in a role, get the certain result, show up in a role, get the certain result. So I then begin to condition a certain pattern of behavior where I learn to show up for others in a role so that there's a certain outcome, even if that means putting myself aside. All right, so it starts in childhood, but it also then develops into adulthood. All right, so what happens in childhood, unless I address it, shows up in those same patterns in adulthood. All right, so also attachment styles. I think we talked about this briefly in another episode, but our attachment style, meaning the way we attach growing up, the way we learn to attach growing up, really develops certain people-pleasing habits, traits, and behaviors. So if I was in an environment that was not predictable, then I learn how to do certain things, again, for the sake of others, in order to make sure they're good, and then the environment seemingly is good, because I want to bring some level of predictability in the environment. Then again, that is something that gets conditioned and it becomes a behavior that follows me into adulthood. So again, these are some of the root causes of people pleasing. All right, so how do I break free from people pleasing? Again, the first step is self-awareness. If you've seen other episodes, when it comes to certain strategies, one of the first steps always is self-awareness. If I am not aware of certain people-pleasing traits, I'm not going to know how to break the cycle. So first, I need to be aware of certain traits. Maybe I am used to being the one that people depend on, right? And that has been reinforced, so I continue to do it, even if it costs me something, right? If I say I'm the one that people can rely on, so I'm going to keep doing it, all right? Or self-awareness is recognizing that I play it safe, recognizing that I am not open and vulnerable about who I am because I feel as though if I do that, then people are not going to like me and I want to be accepted. So I want to do certain things to be accepted. That's people pleasing. Maybe I learned to be aware that I don't know how to say no. Maybe I am aware that not saying no causes me to overextend myself at work, knowing I'm working on one project. Why will I accept another project? Right? So being aware of these things is key. I have to be aware of what we consider people-pleasing traits in order for me to begin to break the cycle. So once I build that awareness, I'm able to recognize the patterns. Am I a yes man? Meaning, do I just say yes to everything? And a part of self-awareness also is recognizing why. So a lot of times people continue certain patterns of behavior because eventually they find a benefit to it. Meaning, if I find a benefit of being someone that people can rely on, then I'm going to continue to do a behavior that gets people to rely on me, even if it's detrimental to my well-being. If I recognize that I can avoid conflict because I have never really learned conflict resolution skills, maybe I want to avoid conflict, and if I do certain things to avoid conflict, that becomes a benefit to me as well. Or if I don't want to be embarrassed, right? Because maybe growing up, I was embarrassed a lot and I don't like the feeling. So then I do things to avoid embarrassment. That then becomes a benefit. And when I start identify things that are benefits, then it keeps me in the pattern of these particular behaviors because I found some type of benefit to continue in this particular behavior. So again, that self-awareness allows me to recognize the patterns and the benefits of these certain behaviors. And then part of that self-awareness is the behaviors that I'm doing is recognizing, is the behaviors that I'm doing serving me well? Is it healthy? Is it helpful for me to continue these particular behaviors? So I may ask my family and friends, hey, when you notice that I do this, what outcome? Because sometimes I may not notice the outcome, right? So that is recognizing self-awareness as well as practicing stopping. This is a strategy that I recognize as an ex-people pleaser I had to do, is learning to stop before I give an answer. Meaning when people would say, hey girl, let's go hang out. And I'm like, okay girl, not even paying attention that I am going to be working 10 hours on that particular day. And I have something the next day early in the morning. And I already said yes. And I'm not taking into account maybe my emotional energy or where I am. So learning to stop before you give an answer to someone is important because it allows you to tune into yourself, to do a check-in to see, okay, can I do this thing that they're asking me? Am I ready to give an answer to something that they're asking for my opinion or idea on? So again, learning to stop before you give an answer is key to breaking the cycle of people pleasing because it allows you to be in tune with your emotional needs, where you are, your wants, your ideas in the moment. Okay, so I encourage you to consider these strategies so that you can break the cycle of people pleasing. And ultimately, one of the biggest barriers or biggest drawbacks, we'll use that word, drawbacks to people pleasing is that it doesn't allow us to be authentic. Okay, so people pleasing robs us of our ability to be authentic, right? So when I am people pleasing, I'm not really showing up as my true self. if I know I don't want to go out and drink, but each time someone invites me and I just go out and drink because that's what everyone's doing and I want to be accepted in a certain friend group, they're not really seeing that that's just not who I am. That's not how I want to be represented, because that's just not who you are. So it really robs you from your ability to be authentic. Or another example could be, I see this among teenagers a lot, right? They're like, okay, well, I don't really want to, wear a certain hairstyle, but I see that everyone else is wearing a certain hairstyle. So I want to be able to fit in, but I really like my natural hair, right? But I don't know if they're going to fully embrace that natural hair. So I maybe spend all this extra money on these hairstyles because I want to be accepted. And this is not just among teens. Let me say this is around adults too, right? So because if society or a certain friend group or certain settings says being natural is not acceptable, then if I'm not really being my authentic self, knowing that I want to be natural, I may be more prone to compromise and people please for the sake of being accepted, right? So again, in order to show up in the world as your authentic self, you have to break the cycle of people pleasing. So people know who you are, what your limitations are, what you will accept, what you won't accept. Because ultimately, breaking the cycle recognizes that everyone is not going to be for me. And that's okay. Let me say it again. Everyone is not going to be for you. And once we recognize that, that is another stepping stone towards breaking the cycle of people pleasing. Because just because one group of friends or relationships are there in one season doesn't mean they'll be in the next. Maybe they were there just to give me the things I needed for that season, and that was it. But I don't want to change who I am just to fit someone else's narrative, just to be accepted by others. So again, not everyone is going to like you, and that's okay. But you have to like yourself, all right? So embracing being authentic means embracing all the pieces of yourself, all your limitations, all the things that makes you who you are, so that you can show up in the world as you need to be. So again, people pleasing is only a drawback to being authentic, and we need you to show up for who you are. And again, for those that matter, don't mind. For those who don't matter, they will mind. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately you have to be who you are and be authentic. So I hope you take a step towards being authentic, meaning saying no when you want to say yes, even if that's to friends, family, parents, relationships. Don't stop being who you are. And I really, really want to hone in on that, because we have a lot of people out here being counterfeits, masking themselves just to fit in, and it's just really impacting their well-being. It's creating anxiety, depression, because they don't feel emotionally safe enough to show up as their authentic selves. But I want to challenge you. Show up as your authentic self. All right. So ultimately, I really hope that you begin to gain insight on the impact that people pleasing can have on our relationships, on how we view ourselves, and ultimately can cause us to really not embrace who we are because we're trying to please others. But I really hope that you take the time to take those steps to break the cycle of people pleasing, so that you can show up in this earth as you need to, as this world needs you to be. Listen, it's only one you. We don't need copycats or robots, any of that. We just need you to be who you are. So I hope that you took something away, and that you make the steps towards not being a people pleaser. Be an ex-people pleaser, okay? I know I am one. So here's a takeaway. People-pleasing behaviors often stem from a deep-seated need for validation. But I'm going to challenge you to be your own validation. Validate who you are. Validate your wants. Validate your needs. Validate your ideas, your dreams. You can do that. And here's a reflection question. What are some things that I need to consider that are standing in the way for me of being my authentic self? What are those things? Consider it. Well, thank you for taking the time to tune into this episode. I really hope that you take away that it's not okay to play it safe and put other people's needs before yours, because we need you to make sure you're in tune with you first before you meet the needs of others, because we can't pour from an empty cup. Thank you. Well, thank you for taking the time to tune into this episode. I really hope that you took something away. Don't forget to share. It is very important that we share this information, as I hope that these conversations provide hope and insight to others, that they are more intentional about their well-being and their mental wellness. So please share. Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.